In the last video was all about night pictures, and I took 3 raw files, showed you how to edit those in just about 10 minutes. But today I want to do the same thing with daytime pictures and actually one evening picture, and just kind of take them and edit them as I go, show you all of the sliders, all of the editing, and just figure out a really cool and unique look with each one. But before I do that, I want to thank Wix for sponsoring this video. Wix allows you to build your own beautiful photography portfolio, and I've been using them for the past year for my videos and my photos and my Lightroom presets, and I've been absolutely loving them. So if you want to check them out and try them out for free, check out the link in the video description below. First up is the evening picture, and I want to bring down the exposure right away, also bring down the highlights, bring up the shadows by quite a bit, and then bring up the whites, which is a very important part because I brought down the exposure so the overall mood looks more kind of night, evening-ish, but then by bringing up the whites, you can bring back so much of the liveliness of this whole photo. I'm also going to increase the clarity to make everything more crisp, just bring out all of the details and add a little bit more vibrance and saturation. Going into the highlights, or rather tonal curves and the highlights right there, I want to bring them down a bit and also bring down the overall light slider and then just kind of fine tune everything. My goal here is to have an overall kind of darkish picture, but still have a lot of shadow detail. Now going into the color slider, I definitely have to make this a lot more warm overall and also bring the tint a bit more towards the right, but it was just too bluish as it was. Now from before to after, there's already a big difference in terms of saturation and just the punchiness of the photo. But what I wanted to do for this one specifically is go to the HSL slider and just select this little pinpointer, go over the blues of one of these buildings and bring down the blues. So I don't want to make this a selective color picture at all. I just want to have more differentiation from the warm tones to the blue tones and kind of have the warm tones be more prominent. And then just the blue tones kind of act as an accent color rather than as this overwhelming color that it was before. And also I'm going to do the same thing with hue, just this time actually fine-tuning the orange tones because right now it looks a little bit greenish, so I'm just going to do that. Perhaps I'm going to go back into saturation, just bring down the blues even more, because what I want to do is go into the split toning and add some artificial warmth into the sky, into all of the highlights. And you want to be careful not to go too far. Also select a kind of more natural looking overall hue. And I'm just going to go with 30 here and then go into the shadows with the blues and add a little bit of medium to light blue. Because again, I want to have some blues in there. I just don't want them to be so overwhelming. Perhaps even darker blues works better. Yeah, I think that looks quite good. Then let's add some vignetting just over the corners. Again, it really helps with the mood. And I think I want to fine tune the red tones right here. Just make them a little bit more specifically reddish. And also a thing I can do is grab a graduated filter for this guy. Just add a little bit of minus exposure for this picture especially. And bring down the overall exposure. Now, I do think maybe I went a bit too far into the minus blues here. So I'm going to bring that back up. And also add some quick radial filters real quick with plus exposure, plus whites. And that is of course for the dodge and burning. So I can just make this train and the bridge and just some specific spots look even cooler and more bright because, that way you can really emphasize a certain area and just complexify the whole lighting. And from before to after, it looks pretty good. But I do think I need a little bit more contrast, so let's add some contrast in contrast slider and also bring down the darks in the tonal curve. And I think that is a really, really cool looking picture. Now going to the second raw file, this is the temple picture of Chiang Mai, and as you can see, if I zoom in here, there's this Buddha which is backlit and it looks very cool, mysterious. You have these two statues right here kind of framing the temple in the middle. So I want to go for a very mysterious and kind of darkish and also very warm overall look. Maybe more warm than really darkish. But let's just try it out. Bringing up the shadows, bring down the highlights, and even bringing down the exposure by a third of a stop more. Again, using my little white trick, you cannot really go too far, otherwise you will clip some areas. but I love the white slider and just bringing those up. Clarity, I'm gonna go really far into the plus clarity here, bring up the vibrance, saturation in a lesser extent, but more so the vibrance. I really just want these green tones in the trees as well as these golden tones to punch a lot more. Now let's figure out how I want to do this with the color temperature, because as I said, I want to go for this warmish look. So I want to at least add some of that warmth by the color temperature, and then right away go into the split toning and add a lot of, yeah, that looks really cool. A lot of warm tones here in the highlights, and then go into the shadows as well and kind of add this greenish light blue tone, but again, not too much, otherwise it would really be too much. So let's just do it like that. Crop the image a little bit, make it more symmetrical, I guess, and also crop down a bit from the top, from this empty space. You can see there's quite a lot of fringing on the high contrast edges, the purple fringing especially. So I'm going to go here into lens correction profile and just remove chromatic aberration, which kind of does a decent job. There's a lot more which I could go into the manual, but whatever, it's a quick edit, so it's most about the overall look and mood, not so much about the fine-tuning. And I'm also gonna add some vignetting over here. And as you can see, I really want to make this mood look a lot more mysterious, a lot darker, and then work especially with these radial filters that are going to play a much bigger role than in the first picture. And just add one over the center entrance right here, add one over this statue on the right as well as on the left, maybe even two. You know, you can just duplicate these filters and drag them over the spot you want them to be in, and that way it's super fast and super flexible to do these dark and burning adjustments. Another thing that I kind of wanted to try out is add a really big radial filter here and go a bit into the plus exposure but into the minus white, because I don't want to have too much clipped. Then go into the warm tones even more and add some color as well. So my goal here was to make it look like the sun was shining through all of these leaves and the whole trees. Yeah, maybe a bit into the plus with the whites even. And that looks quite cool. Okay, I think I have to bring up the saturation as well. And then I could even duplicate that. Okay, so that's way too much. You don't want to go too overboard. Always still keep it kind of looking natural, and go a bit less into the exposure for this one for sure. And then just kind of add one over the right as well as on the left. And that looks pretty decent so far, but I do want to add a graduated filter for the top. Just add a bit of minus exposure, minus clarity, make it more mysterious, and add some radial filters, this time instead of plus exposure, just minus exposure, and add them over the bottom here. I want to make them very narrow and just kind of place them on the side of the entrance. And my goal here is to make a very unique local contrast, just so not everything is super bright, and that way you will add a lot more differentiation from light to dark, and it just makes the whole picture look a lot cooler. So let's check here before and after. It certainly looks a lot more mysterious. Perhaps I could even add kind of a plus exposure filter right here and just kind of make it lead towards the entrance and kind of illuminate some of the roof as well. Not too much, just a bit. Also make this a bit more warm. And yeah, I'm gonna call it right here. So this before and after, huge difference. Should definitely remove all of the chromatic aberration. So let's do that real quick. In the manual of the lens corrections, just go over your actual fringing color. In this case, the purple. And oh yeah, that looks so much better. I really like this picture. It's so cool, mysterious, and I love the natural framing here. Okay, let's go on to the next and last picture, I guess, which is gonna be a quite simple edit. So this is just a street picture in Shenzhen, China, but I really like what's going on. You have the skyscrapers in the background, the Chinese flag, you have people, you have cars, you have just a lot going on, and I love the kind of the angle, especially of the skyscrapers in the background. So what I want to do here is go up with the shadows, down with the highlights, and also add a lot of whites. But this time I also kind of to add a bit of plus exposure. It's just too dark otherwise. And also add a lot of warm tones, a bit of magenta, maybe a little bit of contrast as well. Bring out all of these textures. I love bringing out the textures, especially with city pictures, with the clarity. And also it kind of, the green tones don't really pop, so I want to bring up the vibrance, especially a tiny bit with the saturation, but saturation is kind of more broad, so I like to add vibrance most of the time, more so than the saturation. Now going into the tonal curve, I just kind of want to fine tune, try out some things here. Go into the minus with the shadows, or darks rather, go into the plus with the shadows. And then I can also go into the hue, kind of fine tune the blues, and even take out some of the blue saturation like this. Now going to the split toning, I do want to add a bit more warm tones over the whole sky. Since this was just a midday picture, you don't want to really try to aim for the sunset look, but rather for a little bit of hint of color. And then for the shadow, you know what, I don't think I'm going to add any here because there are enough blues already and I don't really want to go for any other color. So let's add a bit of vignetting, just the basic stuff. And I definitely need a graduated filter for the sky, so I'm going to go into the minus exposure here. Just kind of make the whole sky darker, so it brings out all of the texture, bring out the whites. It's kind of a little bit too magenta-y, so we're going to bring the tint more into the greens. And I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's try to do that with another graduated filter over the bottom left with some minus exposure, and at the top right, a very, very soft one that really blends into the rest of the picture, and just add some plus exposure, add a little bit of warmth. Okay, I definitely have to be careful. Really just a tiny bit of warmth. And then perhaps also plus shadows for these trees. And while I'm at it, might as well add some dodge and burning with the Rail filters. First of all, the plus exposure. Just gonna add some here, right there as well. And okay, maybe this guy on this bicycle. And then I'm gonna go into the minus exposure just for some smaller parts in the skyscrapers and in the back. Duplicate, bring that over here, and kind of bring that over here as well. You really have to balance each filter sometimes to make it look natural and really blend in with the rest of the picture. And while I'm at it, might as well add some more plus exposure filters here over the sidewalk, just here, over there, and maybe this group of people as well. That looks pretty good. Maybe some more on the trees, and even more plus exposure, plus shadows right here, a bit more magenta, and I think that is pretty much all I'm gonna do. So actually, no, I'm gonna add a final and last graduated filter for the sky, bring down the exposure even more, and then add some contrast and plus whites, and that is so I can really bring out this cloud structure a bit more, and perhaps even have to go more into the green tones. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna, maybe just very, very last one. I promised the last graduated filter here for the very bottom to make it a bit darker. It really helps with the atmosphere and perhaps even go a little bit into the minus contrast. Okay, so that's all I'm gonna do here from before to after. I think that's quite a significant difference, and again, it's such a short amount of time. If you would spend more time, you can make everything much more fine-tuned. You can clean up the details, but that is a pretty cool result for these 3 pictures that I'm very happy with. Also, do you want to see more of these videos where I just take 3 raw files and edit them in roughly 10 minutes? Because personally, I really love the fast pace and just showing you how you can edit pictures without really, spending a ton of time on them. But just let me know in the comments down below. I always appreciate your feedback. But before you leave, I want to talk to you about Wix again, because I've been using Wix to build my own website about a year ago. And ever since then, I've been using them to host my photos, my videos, to sell my Lightroom presets, just to have an overall professional, functional, and beautiful photography website. So it's super easy to build. They have a ton of different tools, different templates you can choose from, and you can do some simple stuff like galleries, But then you can also do more advanced stuff like creating your own store, keeping track of inventory, selling prints, for example, or digital downloads, having just all of these options and to be able to do them yourself in a very simple way. And that's just great. So if you want to check them out by yourself and build your own beautiful portfolio, check out the link in the video description or go to wix.com. Thank you very much for watching and have a wonderful day.